Okay, so we're in a different location today. We are in Washington. My mother-in-law is in the hospital, so we flew out here to help. But we are still doing writing. So this was the one we were supposed to do on Thursday of last week, and then we'll do another one tomorrow and another one on Thursday, so we'll get caught up. So last week we finished with basics of story structure, and this week we're going to start on character, okay? So when I say character, does anyone know what I'm talking about?
The main person?
The main character, sure. So when now everybody talks about how they start a book, and I told you guys that everybody starts it different. Some people get a theme, and some people start all their books in different ways. But I will tell you that before I can I always write down a plot. Before I start writing, I have my entire plot in an outline all figured out, right? You guys have seen me. I'm outlining right now. I can't talk, right? I'm busy. I'm writing my outline, and I write it down on a bunch of notebooks like a crazy person. The place that I start, the number one thing that I have to have, I may not have a theme yet. I may not know exactly what the story structure is going to be. In fact, I probably haven't figured out what will be the midpoint. How will the stakes increase? What's going to happen? I don't know. The one thing I have to know, I always do a character sketch before I start writing. So even with a short story, you're going to want a character sketch. And I'm going to show you right here. You spelled this right, except it needs an A. Character. Good job. Okay. So every character has three things. What does every character have? Does anybody know?
Likes, dislikes, and flaws.
That's probably true. One of the things that you said we can use, you said flaws. I want you guys to write down number one. Every character has a wound. That wound is probably what's going to cause their flaws. Okay? So every character has a wound. Now, you may look at some characters that have huge, terrible wounds. Their dad died in front of them when they were 5. Or, something epic, something terrible. Maybe they lost their leg in some kind of accident, and that impacts the rest of it's a literal wound, okay, like a physical wound. Some of them are going to be emotional wounds. Sometimes they're really small. I read this book. It was basically a horror, but it was also a study on multiple personalities. Okay, before this had been diagnosed, this book came out a long time ago, and they made it into a movie. Anyway, in the book, at the end of the book, the big turn, the big thing that you find out, that big gap, you find out that what caused this person to have a split personality, the trauma that resulted in that problem was that she went to her grandmother's funeral, and it was open casket, and she saw her grandmother's dead body, and she could not, it broke something inside her brain and she couldn't recover from it. Now, plenty of people have had open casket funerals. I had 2 open casket funerals and saw my grandmother's dead body, and it did not cause a horrible trauma for me. But it was the entire focus of this book. Like, the book wouldn't have existed if that hadn't happened to that character. So sometimes the wound can be the same for multiple people, and it can not really impact one person. It can be terrible for someone else. So the character wound will be unique. They'll probably have more than one, but they'll probably have one big one, okay? The second thing that every character always has, the first thing is a wound. The second thing is a shield. We're going to spend a whole lesson on shields in a little bit, okay? So let's talk about the shield. What am I talking about? A character has a shield? They don't all have shields, Mom. They're not all fantasies.
Way of coping with stress.
That's exactly right. The shield is the character's way of coping with that wound. So some characters might have experienced something like their mother died when they were young, and every single new person they meet, the first thing that they tell them is, my mom died when I was 5. And they may not literally say that right off, but in the first 5 minutes, it gets worked into the conversation, right? So they're coping with that by something that I would call...
people who are lactose intolerant.
Yeah, tell everybody, or they hide it, and they don't want anyone to know, okay? So our dad is lactose intolerant, and he doesn't want everybody to know, so he'll can you get me a little milk pill? Get one. He'll try and get it and take it without anybody noticing, right? He doesn't want anybody to smell it. He doesn't want anybody to notice it, right? But the lactose intolerance, if you accidentally eat lactose when you shouldn't, it gives you an upset stomach, so that was a joke about that. Anyway, so there's a wound, there's a shield. The shield is how they deal with it. The third thing that every single character has, they have a wound, they have a shield. The third thing is a misconception. That's going to be extremely important for this book. The wound and the shield are very important in making decisions, but the misconception is going to fuel your entire book. I did not understand this concept when I wrote my Marked series. It is the biggest problem, in my opinion, with that entire series. I knew that characters had to undergo growth during the course of the book, because when I was a little kid, somebody came in and said, this is a static or a flat character. It's somebody who doesn't change at all. They suck. They can be fine as an ancillary character, right? But you can't have a main character. Yeah. You can't have a main character, a misconception. So you spell that misconception. Misconception. Here, I'll write it for you, okay? Misconception. So if you're watching and you're having trouble with this one, okay, the misconception is misconception, a misconception, okay? So I thought that for a character to experience growth, which is a round or a full character, that's what you want. You want character growth from the beginning of the book to the end, okay? I thought character development required a character who was weak and whiny and irritating, or at least dumb, or at least refused to look at stuff, so that there would be somewhere for them to go, right? They had to start out annoying so they could end up triumphant, okay? Because otherwise, if they start out awesome and they end up awesome, did they develop?
No.
Nope, not really. They could learn a new skill, but they're not developing, okay? She's okay. So,
Liam Neeson already had that very particular set of skills.
yeah, that's right. And taken here. Well, so you're going to find that in mysteries and thrillers, they're not as particular about character growth or development. And that's one of the things that people criticize them for. But typically, and you're going to find plenty of movies and books that are lacking in these things. Okay, they don't have. I just told you, Marked, I think it's a very good book. But the problem that I have with Marked is I thought to have character growth, you needed to have an irritating, stupid, goofy, irresponsible, obnoxious character, and then they could improve, right? That works. Their misconception is how to manage life, probably. But it's better if you take something, a life lesson maybe, okay, and you have that character change their opinion on it during the course of the book. And the reason why do you guys, so we're going to talk about the misconception today. I told you guys we're going to talk about the three things. We're going to talk about wounds and shields in the next one, okay? So today's is about the misconception. So let's talk about some character misconceptions and how that works. In Marked, I made my character whiny and ridiculous and obnoxious. I didn't need to do that stuff because she could have grown and developed by her misconception. Why do you think we need characters who have a misconception that gets corrected? Why do you think? Why do you think, let's step back one step. Why do people read books and stories? Do we read them because we're just bored? That's why. Dora got it. Even with fiction, even with like Harry Potter, are we going to learn from Harry Potter?
No.
You should. You should learn from Harry Potter, by the way. Because even if it's fiction, even if it's fantasy, even if it's made up, we are searching, as humans, we are searching for answers. From the time we were really, don't mess with anything over there, please. From the time we were cave people living without civilization, we were looking for ways to keep safe, right? Well, what can you teach me about how to defeat a saber-toothed tiger? What can you teach me about how to preserve food for when there's no food out there for winter, right? What can you teach me about these things? We were looking for answers to keep us safe. We are still doing that. But as humans, we're doing it. I think that's part of the reason people really like end of the world and post-apocalyptic fiction. They are looking for answers, things that keep them safe, scenarios to prepare themselves for the worst case scenario, right? But also, we are looking emotionally for what we can learn to keep us safe. So we are going to like a book. One of the most common things you see in positive reviews, 5-star reviews, is this taught me something about myself. This book taught me that this is good and that is bad. This book showed me these following things, okay? One of the greatest things you can do with fiction is help change someone's perspective on something. If they're closed-minded, if they think they can't recover from something. In fact, I put out a book that hardly anybody ever reads called Already Gone. It's not part of a series, so I can't afford to push it with ads, and so it doesn't get a lot of exposure. But I got an email. I think I'd only been publishing for 5 or 6 months. Dora, maybe it was 7 months because we were in England. Walt, Dora, and I were in England for the Grand National last year, not this year. I got an email from a fan who said, I would not have read Already Gone if I knew what the ending was. But now that I've read it, I realized it was exactly what I needed to read. I didn't understand the point that I made at the end of the book, my lesson at the end. She said, I experienced something very similar to what the main character in that book went through, and I thought it was my fault. And after reading that book, I learned to let that go. So to me, that tells me that my book connected with somebody and taught them what their misconception was. And they learned it as that character experienced that same thing. So fiction, even fiction, is about teaching people about their own misconceptions. So you need a character to have a misconception. Let's talk about what some of them are. Eli, pick up a book or a movie.
1984.
Okay, so there's a book. Have you read it?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a book by George Orwell, okay, and it's 1984, and it's about like a totalitarian government basically that manages everyone's lives. There's screens that kind of sort of like an Alexa that's watching you and listening to everything, and they ask other people to report when anybody breaks their rules, and they have a lot of laws and rules that everyone has to adhere to, okay? So I haven't read that one recently enough. I'm going to pick a different one because I don't remember what his character misconception is. Maybe you could tell me. But I mean, if I had to go out on a limb, I'd say his character misconception is probably that there was no way to do anything because no one could beat the government. And there was nothing that he could do, and he was only one person. And so he needed to not even try. He needed to just stay safe.
This misconception was confirmed.
Well, that was confirmed. But he came to the conclusion that even if you can't fix something, you should still take a stand and try your best, right? That's not a justification to not even try. You can't just stand by and let injustices happen, I think, would be the point of that one. But let's pick another one. Let's pick, we've gone over Finding Nemo, so let's do that one, okay? Because we've used it for stuff before. So Finding Nemo is about the fish, right? It's really about Marlin, the dad, who loses his wife and his babies. What is his misconception at the beginning of the movie? Emmy.
Safe. We must stay safe.
Yes. So his belief is, in order to have a good life, you must always stay safe and never do anything dangerous.
You have to do stuff dangerous at one point.
Well, by the end of the movie, he comes to the conclusion that you can't enjoy life if you never take any risks, right? So his misconception at the beginning is rectified at the end, and that is he thinks the only thing you can do is safety is the number one most important thing in life, and you should use that to make all your decisions. And by the end, he realizes there are things that are more important than safety. Love,
Family.
living, family, helping other people. He finds a lot of things that have value that he had given up on and never would have done if he hadn't been put in the circumstance that he had to, right?
Yeah.
So do you think he had a meaningful and permanent value shift between what he thought at the beginning and what he thought at the end?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Nemo, because he got kidnapped for doing something stupid, actually helped Marlin.
Helped Marlin learn. That's right.
Right.
Sometimes other people's
That.
mistakes help us to cure our misconceptions, right? But, you know, really good books, really good movies frequently have a couple of characters, even not just the main character, but have misconceptions for other characters as well that get fixed. A lot of times the villain has a misconception, and sometimes they figure it out and sometimes they don't, right? So let's pick another one. Emmy, can you pick a book or a movie that everybody's read? Am I putting you on the spot? All right, let's try Dora.
Ratatouille.
Okay, let's do Ratatouille. We're on a cartoon roll. So Ratatouille, hey, what is wrong with you? Do not do that. Let's pick another movie, Ratatouille. So at the beginning, what does Remy believe? At the beginning, Remy believes my family is ridiculous and not very smart, and my family has no good taste, and I need to strike out on my own to prove that anyone can cook, right?
Yeah.
How does his opinion change over the course of the movie?
Well, they kind of had a reason to be afraid, and his taste got him into trouble with the
Right.
humans.
And what does did he value family?
No.
He felt like his family held him back and held him down, and he was not like them at all. And I think by the end of the movie, his original belief is proven right, that anyone can cook and that it's okay to be different, right? So his dad, remember I told you there's multiple characters? His dad had a misconception that there was something wrong with Remy and he was less than because he cared about things that they didn't, right? Mm-hmm. By the end of the book, his dad's opinion has shifted. His opinion has shifted to value something else over just his taste. His family, loyalty, and friends are as important to him by the end as his eating and his culinary skill, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so he learns the value of both. All right, he's willing to risk everything he cares about to try and help his family and his friend, right? Just like his dad is now willing to risk things to help Remy, even though he's different and not what his dad had in mind, right?
What does the dad do?
Well, remember, the dad leaves and is like, see ya, but he was always telling Remy, you're such a failure. You don't understand. You're a terrible rat, right?
Yeah.
And then by the end, he's like, okay, we'll come in and help you. And they all help him cook, and they come in and try and help save the day. And he recognizes, all right, maybe there's some kind of happy medium. Maybe there's a balance. Family matters, but I can be different, and he'll accept me. He thought his dad would never accept him, but by the end, his dad did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's do one more example, and then we'll call it good for today. And your assignment today, let's put a little star next to it so you know what your assignment is, because it's due tomorrow, because we're trying to make up. So your assignment for today is to pick 3 books or movies and tell me what the main character's misconception is and how it changes by the end of the story.
Can you write it for me?
3 books I'm going to put or movies, and explain the main characters. Now I do main character by M, big C. Main character's misconception.
Ooh, I know.
And how it changes.
Ooh, I'm gonna do
By
Max
the
the
end.
Dung Beetle.
That's fine. And that's the thing. What you'll find is really well written picture books, they're going to have a misconception that is cured at the end.
There's something wrong
Legitimately,
with
there will be a
because I
point
don't
with
like
it.
poop.
I mean, if you're reading just random stuff, no. But good with a theme and a story and characters, there will be a misconception that is rectified by the end. So
Does
let's
Dr. Seuss have
let's
one?
do one more. Probably, but I have to read through the whole book to know. So let's do another one. Well, Green Eggs and Ham has one, right? So if you want to know if Dr. Seuss ones have it, Green Eggs and Ham, he's telling him the whole time, try this, and the character keeps saying, go away and leave me alone, I know what I want. I think certainly all of us have felt that before. When someone's like, try my carrot cake, and I'm like, I hate pecans, go away. I actually like them, but you know, I don't like it, because as a mom, I'm always saying that. Please try this food that I just made. It looks weird, I know I don't want it. You finally shove it into the kid's mouth and they spit it out anyway. Or you finally shove it into their mouth and they're like, oh, that tastes better than I thought. Maybe I will eat this entire bowl. So it can go either way, but you won't know unless you try it. And I think that's the misconception that's cured in the Green Eggs and Ham, is that it actually was good, you know. So, but that's not really what I meant as an example. So let's do a real example. What's another cartoon, since we've been doing a lot of cartoons?
Caterpillar.
Oh no, let's do a real one. Let's do Hunger Games, okay? Hang on, hold up. Oh my gosh. So you guys have seen Hunger Games or read the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tessa, have you seen the movie? Okay. So in Hunger Games, who's the main character?
The lady
Katniss Everdeen. Okay. So we have Katniss Everdeen. She's the main character, and she believes at the beginning of the book that the only thing that matters is survival and keeping her family safe. And that leads her to offer herself as tribute for her sister, right? I'm going to go ahead and make this over the series because Katniss is not the most developing character. But by the end of the series, Katniss has recognized that maybe keeping herself and her family is not the only thing that matters. And she is then willing to sacrifice for what? For the cause, finally.
Yeah.
She's willing to say it's really freedom for everybody that matters, not just me and my family. She has other people she cares about. She's seen that sometimes the sacrifices people make can affect lasting
Wait, what
change.
does she sacrifice?
What does she sacrifice? Does Katniss risk herself?
I didn't read it.
Okay. Eli, you've read them, right? What
Yeah.
does Katniss sacrifice during the thing? She goes into the Hunger
She
Games
goes
the first
way
time
out
for
for
her
her.
sister. That's a
Yeah.
sacrifice, number one, right?
She goes
She
way
offers
out of her
herself.
own security zone. She
Yeah.
ends up
She
doing
could
it.
have continued to stay home and lived as a victor, right, off the dole. Well, not in the second one. She just gets dragged back in. But again, they have to pick 2 out of 3 people to go into the Hunger Games. It was her, and then Peeta, and then who's the other guy?
The other
Well, it was
weird
Haymitch.
guy.
Old guy, Haymitch.
And originally she got picked with Haymitch, and then it was like Peeta, which is.
Yeah, and then Peeta said he would go in, so Peeta's sacrificing on her behalf, right?
Don't worry, I know I
Um,
will give you a worse chance of
I
winning.
know. Anyway, so then and then in the third one, she goes all in on trying to help the rebellion, and part of the reason is that Peeta gets captured by the Capitol, right? So, but the point is that her misconception is the only thing she cares about is herself and her family at the beginning, and she also completely blames her mom for being a lousy mom, right? By the end, she understands a little bit that her mom went through trauma and everybody responds differently. She's a little nicer to her mom. And she realizes that keeping her sister safe is important, but there's more to it than that. And she actually goes in whole hog on trying to support the rebellion, okay? So those are some examples, okay? We can talk about more. If you guys need help with these, you can come in and talk to me about it. I want us to start identifying the misconceptions because I always know my character's misconception. And the last thing I'm going to say is, why do you think it matters so much that we know what the character's misconception is before we write the story?
Because then you know what to make them like weak about.
And you also know what things, when I'm looking at it, I'm like, I don't know what to have happen in this chapter. I don't know what story event should come next. I look at my character's misconception and I say, what would make her double down? I know I'm right. Or what would make her go, oh, and crack and change her mind, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm looking at when I'm looking at story events and I'm trying to figure out what should happen because there's this whole world of things that could happen, right? You know something big has to happen at certain points. When I'm trying to figure out what to make happen, I look at my character's misconception and say, what would make her believe this more? What would reinforce her belief? Because at the beginning, you want to reinforce their belief so they double down. Because remember, they're not going to solve, if they solve it right away, what happens to the story?
It's Bowen.
Story's over. Well, your story is just done. You got a short story, all right? Or a novella at best. So if you want to have this first plot point, midpoint, worst stakes, end of the world, second plot point, all is lost. If you want that to happen, you need to have increasing stakes, which means your character is going to have to double down on their beliefs until at the end when they realize, but I know this, it has to be true. And then at the end they switch. That's what you saw in Hunger Games. Katniss only cared about getting out to protect her family.
But then
she promised her sister. At the very end, she takes a huge risk. At the very end, she could have knocked Peeta over and he would have been eaten by the dogs. And she would have gone on and Peeta wouldn't have even argued because he wanted her to survive, right? Mm-hmm. She could have done exactly what she knew from the beginning she should have done. Katniss Everdeen protects Katniss Everdeen to get home to protect her sister. That's what matters. That's the pact she made with herself, with her sister, and with the guy Gale, right? Mm-hmm. She would have gone home. She even had a hot boyfriend waiting. But she realized that sometimes save yourself is not the only thing, right? And she decided, I'm going to gamble my own life, which I would use to protect Prim, my sister, and my mom. I'm going to gamble my own life, and I am going to push the Capitol hard. And she does it at the end of the first book, when instead she takes the berries and they eat them, right? They eat the poison berries, and she's going to deprive the Capitol. She threatens to kill herself, basically, because she knows they can save her. But she also knows if they choose not to save her, she's gone. And they both eat these poison berries, and the Capitol wouldn't have a victor at all. Everybody would have died. It would have been an epic disaster for them. So instead, the Capitol's solution is to save them both, which she thought it would be, but she didn't know, right? So that's her taking her misconception and turning it on its head at the very end of book one. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's what we need to look for. We need that misconception so we know how to push the character's buttons. She has to save herself. She has to save herself. She has to save herself. And then at the end, you flip it, right? And their misconception is changed. Okay, so that's the first one.